Shaper Origin, you guys know it, and it's a tool with a massive fan base, but it equally has a massive number of people that don't understand why someone would want to manually push around a CNC. I've been shooting videos with this guy for over 5 years, and I can see both sides of the argument, but as of today, that argument might be over. Okay, so hold up. What is this thing? And I know some of you out there are extremely excited to see it, and others have no idea what I'm talking about. So this is Benchpilot, and it's the latest addition to the Shaper Tools ecosystem. And yes, it has become a bit of an ecosystem. So full disclosure, this video is sponsored by Shaper Tools. I've been working very closely with them over the last 5 years, ever since I put out my first video on Shaper Origin. And that video has kind of become a ubiquitous introductory guide to the tool. So if you're curious to know more about the tool, go watch that video. It still holds up, but a lot has changed in 5 years, and I want to cover a whole bunch of that, including their biggest change, which is now Benchpilot. Essentially a quick release harness that makes your tool handheld when you want it and autonomous when you don't. Now I want to test the limits of this tool, and we're gonna get to that. But first, let's talk about how this gets set up. Benchpilot is 3 feet wide by 2 feet deep, and all the work goes on kind of cantilevered off the front of it. So you do need to attach the back, whether that's with clamps, or in my case, I added in some threaded inserts because I have an extra deep workbench. Shaper provides these L brackets that clip onto the back side of it, and then I used my own hardware to screw it in. Now, the nice thing about the threaded inserts is it's just 2 screws, and you can remove it super easily. Benchpilot is designed around Workstation, which is Shaper's work-holding platform. And while you don't have to have Workstation in order to use Benchpilot, it is an incredibly handy thing to have and gives you a lot more options as to what you can do with the tool. The other thing that they've added in is this shelf upgrade kit. To maximize the work area with Benchpilot, they've created a larger shelf that you can set things on, and they have this leg that is expandable to raise it up and down depending on your height to support the weight of Origin on the back side. After that, it's pretty much standard operating procedure. You set up your workpiece in the same way you would have done without Benchpilot. And the nice thing about this is it adds functionality to Workstation, but it doesn't really take anything away. You can still use it handheld in the way that you're used to, but you also have this gantry that can support the tool. With Benchpilot all set up, now let's plug in Origin and start cutting something. Some of the coolest improvements that they've made to this machine in the last 5 years are actually on the software side. And I want to point out how they integrated the software for Benchpilot because it's really cool. Basically, you just detach or attach Benchpilot and a little logo pops up in the corner that says Pilot that establishes the mode. It's incredibly seamless, and we'll play around with it more as we move forward. Another thing that's really interesting about this tool is that you can modify the feeds and speeds with a dial. There's a dial on the router as well as a dial on Benchpilot. Benchpilot controls how fast the machine is moving, and the router controls the RPMs of the bit. So it's really intuitive, and if it's cutting poorly, you can make adjustments as it's going. You may have already noticed, but this is the same file that I started with in the original Shaper Origin video, and that's my logo cut into Baltic birch plywood, and I still have the original, so we're going to compare side by side and see the differences between the two. I mean, that's great. It looks great. And when you compare it to the one that I made when I first got the Origin, they're both great. This one has a couple flaws, which are a result of me not pulling the machine out of the cut. And the Benchpilot eliminates all of that chatter and those mistakes. Now, why do we want this thing? Because my excitement about getting Origin is its small form factor. It goes in a box. You put it away. It doesn't have to be out all the time. And now we're adding a lot more to it. And I can understand why people would be like, why not just go and buy a normal CNC? What Shaper has done really well, in addition to being obsessive about their engineering, is that their software interface is by far the best I've ever interacted with. Until you actually get your hands on one, it's really, really hard to give you that feeling. The feeling is that this is a collaborator in the project, much like your favorite hand tools are. It doesn't feel like digital fabrication in the same sense as going and sitting on your computer and programming and getting all of that stuff dialed in and then hooking it up to the CNC and pressing go and walking away. And when it screws up, you have to start over, you have to reprogram. There's a lot of things that you can correct on the tool on the fly. You can design on the fly, you can design on the tool, you can design on your phone. So we're gonna test that out. We're gonna test a whole bunch of different things. And I wanna try my best to show you why this is so cool and what distinguishes it from just a normal CNC. One of the projects that I've been putting off for over a year now is just making some sort of organizer for my Japanese chisels. They've been rolling around in a drawer and it's been very annoying. When you want to use them, you need to bring them all out and have to pick them up individually. So I came up with this idea to make a tray for them. To create a vector image of the chisels, I traced around them and then I used Shaper Trace, which is this frame that they came out with, I think a little over a year ago, that immediately vectorizes any drawing that you have. It makes it really easy to get measurements off of things, and it automatically pairs to Shaper Studio, which is their simplified drawing tool, and it's really good for making really simple shapes really quickly. You can build some base forms around your drawings, and then you can combine those forms together to form larger forms. And in this case, I'm just making a base chisel that I'm going to use to duplicate over and over again that I can shape to the rest of the chisels so they all look the same. Now, one thing that I really like about the Shaper ecosystem is this isn't proprietary. You don't have to use this software in order to use the tool, but this software does help use the tool easier. And I'd say that I use Adobe Illustrator like 75% of the time, but I'm most comfortable in that software. However, I'm finding myself using Studio more and more as they're updating it. And one of the biggest updates that they just did was setting the tool depth. So this is new with Benchpilot. You can actually set the depth of the cut, and they also have a preview mode so that you can see what that cut's gonna look like. All right, so now let's get into some actual cutting. And for that, I found an offcut from the kitchen build of white oak that I'm gonna use for this tray. I attached the panel to the shelf using some double stick tape, and then I could start setting up the spindle. I decided to do the engrave cuts first, mostly because I'm the least comfortable with these. I didn't know what depths to go at, and I didn't want to mess it up after I'd done all the pocketing cuts. And for this, I actually didn't even hook it up to Benchpilot because they're so fast that I just decided to do it manually. And I can also check those depths as I'm going to make sure that they're right. And once I got them dialed in, just knock them out. I've done engraving with their fonts plenty of times before, and they have specially designed fonts for engraving to make sure that nothing goes weird. But I also thought it'd be cool to try something a little more complex with a Japanese symbol. This is the symbol for elm tree, which is what my last name, Alm, means in Swedish. It came out great, and I was super happy with it, so now it's time to switch to those pocketing cuts. And for this, I'm definitely attaching Benchpilot because it's going to take a while. It's kind of weird to walk away from this tool. I've been using it for so long and I'm so used to it that it's hard for me to realize that I could just walk away from it and leave it alone and let it do its thing. It's honestly really nice because there's a lot of projects that I would have done in the past that I just decided not to because they're too time consuming. But now I can leave them alone and start in on the next project. And for that, I've got these new Rockler diamond sharpening stones. I've always wanted a set of diamond stones. Rockler just came out with these. They are beautiful, perfectly flat, and I want to make sure that they stay that way, that they don't get damaged. So while this machine runs, I'm designing the trays for those, and that will be the next project that we cut. I was noticing that the dust collection wasn't working very well and realized that the hose was clogged. And this is one really nice thing about Benchpilot is you can pause it while it's doing its work. You can unclog a hose, you can vacuum everything up. You could actually leave it overnight, come back the next day, and it's going to remember where it was, what it had cut before, and it's going to finish everything that it needs to do. You might have this option on other CNCs, but a lot of times you'll have to rehome the machine or go back a couple lines of code or something like that. You don't have to worry about this with Origin and Benchpilot because it knows where it is in space and it remembers all the spots that it has cut already. That looks awesome. So now I'm realizing that I kind of want some finger pulls on the sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line here, flip it over, and that will allow me to keep the same grid in here. And then I can just draw the finger pulls that I want on the tool, making it super easy. With the panel placed in the same orientation but upside down, I can add to the scan, and the scan is just adding a new image to the area so that I can see the panel. But it keeps the same data of the grid where I want to place things, so I use that new image and I draw on the tool using a slot shape. They have a whole bunch of different shape options. So I made 2 slots, one on each side, and then popped in a giant bullnose bit and started cutting away. I manually adjusted the feeds and speeds because you don't want a big bit like this running too fast. The right side cut perfectly and it was beautiful, but the left side, the machine started to make a funny noise, and then this happened. Well, the bit came loose. That is totally my fault for not tightening it enough. I've never had that happen before, and it's actually really good to know that it will shut down when this happens. Jeez, it's pretty scary. That's on me. It's a very big bit, so tightening it a lot more is important, and I didn't do that. Let's see if we can get this started again. For a second, I was worried that I broke the machine. Totally remembers exactly where I left off. That's so cool. Okay, let's try this again. The warning that you saw on the screen told me to restart the machine. It had sensed some weird vibration. This machine is designed to do this. I've since talked to the people at Shaper. I was just really impressed. I didn't realize that it would do that. And the nice thing about it is it did not ruin the workpiece. There's a little tiny gouge in the upper corner, but it was totally salvageable, and it ended up coming out great. These are the type of projects that I think about doing all the time, and I never actually do because they take time and I don't have a lot of it. So I'm just really thrilled with this. This took a couple of hours to do, but most of that time was letting Origin do its own thing, and I was able to do other things in the shop. One thing I will point out is I did add a little bit of pencil to the lines. I probably should have gone a little deeper with the engraving, but it looks great with just a little bit of pencil, and then you sand it back and they're slightly darker. I also wanted to point out that you can cut foam on this tool. So if you want to do these sorts of inserts like this was all cut out with the tool. In fact, it's something I'd been procrastinating on for like 3 years because this just comes with a chunk of foam, and I never wanted to spend the time to cut it out. Now that I have Benchpilot, it's a totally different story. So while I was making this, I was designing the trays for the diamond stones. So the idea is to do sort of like a nesting thing. So they all stack up together into one big block, and then they come apart, and then they interlock together on the sides. I think it's a cool design, but the tolerances are super tight. So I need to make sure, I'm gonna do a quick cut on some MDF, see how well that works before I run some real stock through. I picked this project specifically because I wanted to try batching parts out. This is something that I shied away from before having Benchpilot, but now it kind of makes sense to batch out a bunch of parts when you need them. The first thing that I'm testing is just to make sure that the diamond stones are going to fit into these slots. I took good measurements, but I wanted to sneak up on the cut and make sure that I got it really nice and tight so they're not moving around in there while I'm sharpening. The stone didn't quite fit, so I hopped on Studio on my phone and was able to make the adjustments. The adjustments automatically update on Origin, so all I had to do was cut it again. Now it's time to try it for real, and for this I'm using 3 different species of wood, one for each grit of diamond stone. I've got oak, cherry, and walnut, and I'm going to cut all of them at the same time. Don't really know why I did this, but I didn't cut it quite deep enough, and it's super easy to just reset the depth and have it cut perfectly, but I was lazy, I guess, but it ended up taking more time. So I left just a tiny onion skin and went over to the drum sander and then drum sanded that onion skin down until I could just snap the parts off. It worked just fine, but it's definitely not the most efficient way to do it. Well, I'm not super happy with that decision. This one was very clever, if I do say so myself. I was trying to figure out a good way to flip the part over and keep it registered properly. So what I did was I cut an outline out of 1/4" plywood that goes all the way through that sheet, and so I can use that to pop the parts in and out of. Okay, so off camera, I've been making a top for this, and I was gonna make it into a surprise, but I've also been using it as a test platform. And one thing that I realized is that once I do the offsets, I'm actually gonna eat through this corner right here. So, one thing that I figured out is that since I have this registration point, I'm actually able to put these ones in again and recut this lip so they're a little bit smaller, so hopefully this doesn't happen on the rest of them. This is totally a happy accident. At first I was like, oh, it's fine, you know, I'll blow out the side or I'll make them over again from scratch. But I don't have to do that. I can just cut that rabbet back a little tiny bit, and that way the offset isn't gonna eat into that registration point. After that, I can flip the part over and do what I had originally intended on doing, and that's doing a pocket cut on the underside that lines up with that rabbet that I was just working on. Once the cherry piece was routed, I pulled that one out and then popped the walnut one in. Once the walnut was done, I pulled that one out and popped in the oak. And while the oak was running, I started cleaning up the inside of the walnut one, and this is where I felt like it was really sinking in, that I felt like a one-man factory. I was getting a lot done in a very short amount of time, and all this pocketing cuts, these things that I kind of dreaded before, I can let the machine do the tedious stuff while I do the fun part of woodworking. One of the coolest features about Workstation is its vertical work holding ability, and this is honestly not the most amazing display of its abilities. It can actually do quite a lot. It can do legitimate joinery. It can make tenons and mortises. It can also do box joints, and it's really cool, and hopefully I can show that off in a later video. But for now, I want to put the grits on the side of each of these trays. I typed out the numbers on tool and cut it with an engraving bit, and I felt like it was a really nice touch. Even though I messed up my first attempt at a lid, I really wanted to have a lid on the top of this. And what I thought would be pretty cool is to have a strop on top of the diamond stones. It's pretty common to use a bit of leather to get just a little more polish out of your chisels, which makes them that much sharper. The assembly of these things couldn't be much more satisfying. I am so happy with the fit of them, and I can't wait to put them to use. All right. These things are awesome. They work so well, and the tolerances on them, I mean, it's really good. And all that comes down to is just the accuracy of the machine and the fact that you can dial things in. You know, the mistake that I made on this lid, I was able to correct that as I was building. And I was able to make another lid because all that information is saved. And I made this in basically like 15 minutes. So now I can make all of these over and over and over again. So not only am I prototyping, but I'm also saving all the information. So if I do want to produce this product, I can. So these are two very practical projects, but now I want to try something a little more creative. I really liked the look of the diamond stone cases, and I still had the oak, cherry, and walnut out, so decided to rip down a couple of boards into some thick veneers. You guys have been on me about using a push stick at the bandsaw, and I haven't had a good push stick up until now. When I ordered the diamond stones, I also ordered this push stick from Rockler, and it's pretty awesome. I'm on a bit of a mission right now to build all the furniture in our house. And it's going to be a long journey, but one of the big things that we need is a set of bedside tables. We're currently using a pair of outdoor tables, and it's getting annoying. So this is part of a bigger build, going to be part of a full video eventually, but I figured this was a good time to experiment with a concept that I've been kicking around in my brain. And speaking of experimentation, I thought this might be a good time to try vacuum press glue ups. I've never done this, but I've always wanted to give it a go. The plan is to stack up one of each species to form each drawer front. So oak, walnut, cherry stacked up together, and then when I carve them away after the glue up, I'll reveal those layers underneath. To get the best results, I need a near perfect glue up. I don't want any gaps in between, and that's where the vacuum bag comes in. It provides consistent pressure across the entire glue up, making sure that I have the lowest chance of having any gaps or voids. The glue up was a complete success, absolutely dead flat, and no gaps in between. Now it's time to load up my file and start cutting. This one is a very big one, so it's going to take a lot of time. Okay, so what I just realized is that it's cutting a bunch of air because for every single one of these pocket cuts, it thinks that it needs to cut out the center and it doesn't. So I'm going to switch all the paths on the tool to inside line cuts, and that should take care of most of it. And if I have to do a pocket cut on one or two, I'll run those. But I think this is going to be a much more efficient way to cut. So I suppose I should explain what this concept is. I thought it'd be cool to cut a topographic map, which has been done millions of times on CNC. And there's a reason for that. It's because it looks really, really cool. And I thought it'd be cool to actually reveal layers of different species of wood as I cut down. But also, I thought it'd be fun to add a little twist to it, which I'll show you in a second. But first, let's talk about how it's cutting. I switched it out from a pocket cut to an inside cut, meaning it's just cutting on the inside of the line of my drawing. Now that leaves some high spots because there are certain areas in the topography that are wider than the width of the router bit, and so that leaves these high spots. I could have run more pocket cuts, but instead I decided just to chisel them out. Ultimately, I'm not sure if I saved any time by changing over from the pocket cuts to the inside line cuts, but I'm experimenting here and trying to figure things out. Shaper is trying to avoid like the G code and the really deep toolpath programming that you can do on other machines, mostly because it's complicated and you end up spending a lot of time programming the machine. They've gone very simple here, and I really like that. It's pretty easy and intuitive to understand, but as a result, you can't get quite as granular and complex as you could with G code. With the roughing done, I can now start talking about that secret addition, and that's a little bit of brass. I've spent a lot of time hiking in the woods, and I love looking at topographic maps. I think it's really cool how they depict trails that you're hiking on and how they follow the topography, but they kind of have this man-made addition. So what I thought would be cool is if I made those paths out of brass and inlaid them into the surface of the topography.
Oh, that's such a good fit.
That's perfect. I cut out the smallest of the paths first to make sure that my offset was right, and then I could apply that offset to the rest of the paths. It turned out that a 0.004 offset was perfect and got this almost snap-in fit. And yes, you can cut brass on Origin. It's pretty awesome. You have to watch your feeds and speeds, and it's recommended to use an O flute bit, which cuts really, really nicely. I made the cuts in 2 passes, and the first pass was a roughing pass. The second pass is just a tiny little cut that cuts it down to the correct size. It was really mesmerizing to watch this thing cut and take away all that metal and just leave a little bit of wood underneath. Well, I told you that we were going to put this tool through its paces, and now it's time to try 1/4" brass, because I'm not done yet. I really want this path to connect with bridges, and those bridges are going to be made out of 1/4" brass, and those will function as the drawer pulls for the drawer fronts. There's really no difference between cutting the 32nd inch brass and the 1/4" brass. It's kind of the same steps, and it's just slowly stepping down by 2/100ths of an inch each time. So it cuts this like 14 times before it cuts all the way through. Now, I've been told that trying to do this handheld is not advisable, but the consistency of Benchpilot is the reason why it can cut so well. So that's just the first pass I didn't want to cut all the way through, and now I'm going to do an inside pass to clean it up. But it honestly looks pretty darn clean, even without a cleanup pass. So now I'm going to go shift the offset to 0 and cut it again, and then cut all the way through. I was able to cut the first bridge without any issues, but the second bridge, right at the very end, started to vibrate. Well, of all the spots, that's probably the best spot because you'll never see it. It'll get glued in. The bit loosened up again. I need to get better about tightening these things a little bit harder. What I actually think happened is that I set my depths a little bit too aggressive on that very last cut. It was cutting through too much material all at once, and it just it loosened up the bit as a result of all the vibration. I recut that part, and it was totally fine. The bridges looked pretty darn good right off the tool, but there's definitely some tooling marks on the surface of them, and for that, I'm just going to use some sandpaper. The beauty of brass is it polishes up really easily just using hand tools. So I've got 120 grit sandpaper spray glued down to a board, and then I follow that up with a bit of Scotch-Brite, and that's enough to polish it up to a really nice finish. Now all that's left to do is check and see how they fit. Well, it's insanely satisfying how well those bridges clipped into place. One of them actually clicked when I put it in. I'm really excited to finish this project, but I'm going to finish it in the next video. I'm going to cut these into 2 drawer fronts. These will be the drawer pulls. Got a lot of plans for it, but you're going to have to stay tuned for that. Benchpilot. I think they knocked it out of the park. I remember when they brought out Workstation and it completely changed this tool and what you can do with it. And I think Benchpilot is the same thing. It controls the feeds and speeds in a way that you manually just can't. And it also allows you to make things that you probably wouldn't. I mean, I think all of these projects that I just made are things that I wouldn't have made otherwise. And I'm glad that I did. It was super fun to experiment with it and see what it's capable of. And even when I was editing this video, I made an organizer for the backside of Benchpilot because this is basically unused space. The machine doesn't need that space. So they already have some files on Shaper Hub that you can download for free. And I mean, my time investment on that was nothing because I just turned the machine on, let it go, and turned it off, and I had an organizer. It's pretty sweet, I'm not gonna lie. I'm really excited to have it in the shop, and if you wanna learn more about the tool or its functionality, I can only cover so much in a video like this, but go check out the Shaper Tools website and their sessions. They do live sessions every other week, and they have a whole archive on their website that you can check out, and it's full of some pretty wild stuff, like doing marquetry with the machine, doing like dovetails and crazy joinery, and it's really worth checking out that archive. So thanks to Shaper Tools for sponsoring this video. Thank you as always to my Patreon supporters. You guys are the best, and I'll catch you on the next one.